For just shy of 3 whole years, the women of the South London area were put on alert. Because between 1989 and 1992, a series of violent yet unpunished incidents take place, involving one of society's predators, preying on vulnerable women. However, it was assumed at this time that if you stuck to safe places and spaces, then you'd be fine. Meaning that a 10 a.m. Wednesday morning dog walk for one mother and her son should have been a morning of bonding and enjoying the sunshine. Instead, that dog walk turned into one of the most gruesome, most haunting, and as a parent myself, one of the scariest possible days that anyone could have imagined. A 2-year-old boy is found clinging to the lifeless and horrifically murdered body of his own mother. And the first thing that people needed to know was just what sort of person could commit a crime not only so horrific, but so heinous and damaging. What sort of person takes pleasure in killing a mother in front of her own son? And within 9 weeks, the police get their man. An arrest is made. But the problem is, there's no evidence, and this is where the case gets shady. So in today's video, we're going to take a deep dive into one of the most controversial police investigations in UK history. An obvious suspect that maybe wasn't as obvious as UK forces would have liked to believe. A family who had to escape the country to escape the media scrutiny. An evil villain who used the police's own ignorance to evade attention, and a 16-year time frame where one man's life was completely ruined. Only for forces to later find out that they were focusing their attention in a close but wrong area. And had those officers have taken a step back from the picture, then maybe they would have been able to stop another horrific double murder that happened in the interim. This is the brutal murder of Rachel Nickell.
Right, before we get into this episode, I just want to say that there will be themes that we discuss around the terrible attacks of several young women all over London town. And we will also be discussing themes of sexual assault and lots of trauma as well. So please be aware of that before watching the rest of the show and before listening to any more. Thank you, as always, for watching Joey and Josh. And if you do want to get more true crime just like this, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's get into what happened on the 15th of July, 1992.
And so now that you've given the date, Josh, it's probably time to reveal why this is another case that is slightly close to home for us. Pretty much all of the characters involved in this case lived within a stone's throw almost of where we're recording right now. The place that we're about to go to tell the story of what happened that day is a area that you yourself will have known very well growing up.
Very well. I've been to Wimbledon Common probably 20 plus times. I found it to be one of the most suburban, middle class, safe areas of London that I have ever been to. It is so leafy. There's so many people walking about the Common with their dogs, feeling very relaxed, living the life, spending lots of money. And by the way, it is right by Wimbledon town, or Wimbledon Village, we should say. And Wimbledon Village is probably one of the most expensive postcodes in that area.
Yeah.
Like you would have to say, like, I've looked at houses around Wimbledon Village. You have got to be $1 million plus for a flat.
It's the sort of place that back in these days you could walk through at night and you wouldn't really have to worry.
You wouldn't even think about it. You would not even think about it. That is like literally my fiance. I would be very happy for her to completely walk through Wimbledon Village any time of the day or night, and I wouldn't even think about it for a second.
And therefore, it would be the public's assumption that if that was safe, it would definitely be safe to walk through there with your dog and your son on a normal Wednesday morning.
10 o'clock in the morning.
10 o'clock in the morning.
Very, very safe. In fact, if you said to me, Name a place in London that you'd rather walk through at that time where you knew for certain you were going to be safe. It would be Wimbledon and it would be Richmond. Yeah. That would be the only place in London where I'd go, absolutely fine. No problems.
Well, unfortunately, on this day, that trend that I would very much agree with, or opinion that I would agree with, didn't hold strong. And just quickly, before I start to tell the story of that day, I want to make something very, very clear here, Josh. I've always grown up knowing about this case. We'll get into a little bit more of that. Why? I've always grown up repeating her name in the way that it was always broadcast. I'm talking BBC, Crimewatch, things like that, which at the time was Rachel Nickell.
Yes.
However, I've now been told and heard a couple of more sort of up-to-date versions where they've covered the case, where they refer to her, and it's been said that the name was Rachel Nickell and that everyone else sort of had it wrong in the reporting after. So we're going to go by Rachel in this episode. We do not mean any disrespect. There's a little bit of confusion over the surnames. So Wednesday the 15th of July, 23-year-old mother Rachel wakes up and she goes about her morning routine, which typically consisted of her and her son Alex, just 2 years old, going for a dog walk in Wimbledon Common. She liked it, he loved it, and I'm sure that the dog also loved it. And Wimbledon Common was exactly like Josh said, where you would go for a dog walk. It was picturesque. And to be honest, one thing that I've noticed about dog walkers, you probably don't realise this because you don't have a dog, Josh.
No.
Everyone fucking knows each other. It's like
they do.
Mums.
Yeah. I remember when I did have a dog, because I used to do this where I used to take dog walks actually in St Albans, which is a very similar place to Wimbledon Common when you go on the Common in St Albans. And I tell you what, you do get to know people, you become friendly, you get to know the dog's name, you get to know the owners, and they actually often, dog walkers get to build a bit of a community. They look after each other a little bit because you're always like, this person's out at the same time as me, check in on them, make sure they're all right, that sort of thing.
Well, funny enough, we saw exactly that in the case of Nicola Bully that we covered.
Yes.
It was predominantly dog walkers that were involved in the initial searches and the initial investigation for that lady. Now, Rachel Nickell is not on her own in this park. As I've said, she has her dog, she has her son, but just 200 yards roughly were other parents who were either with their kids, there were other dog walkers, there were even people that were setting up for picnics that day due to the fact that it was going to be a scorching, lovely day in the capital. But just as Rachel's walking through a more secluded area, again, as I say, only about 200 yards away from an open space where lots of people actually are, a man jumps out from a bush and he grabs hold of Rachel in front of her 2-year-old son, immediately getting her to the floor. This man both quickly and violently attacks Rachel in such a frenzied attack that her head was nearly removed off of her shoulders. She was stabbed over 49 times in front of her poor son, Alex, who wouldn't have known exactly what was going on. And this man then sexually assaults her body before casually walking off from the crime scene and stopping to wash his hands off in a stream of water on the way, as if nothing had happened. No one, despite there being loud screams, hears a thing from Rachel. And the most heartbreaking part of this story for me is the fact that Rachel's son Alex was said to be shaking his mother, asking her to wake up, believing that it may well have been some sort of game that she was playing with him. And as a parent, that's the thing that breaks my heart more than anything. And then at 11:15, a dog walker finds Molly, the dog. She's off of her lead. She's acting frantically. This dog walker then follows Molly back and they see Alex cuddled to the blood-stained clothing of his deceased mother. And this is the probably most heinous part of this story, most heartbreaking part of this story that I can even begin to contemplate, not because of just the fact of how you'd feel as a parent, but also as a parent that's taking my kid to this park and these places, and it's very close to our doorsteps.
It is. And look, I don't think you can truly understand how traumatic this moment must be for a 2-year-old boy to see his mum in this state. And what we'll say before we go on is that our thoughts and feelings very much go out to Alex, having to see this and remember this moment, deal with the press that we'll go on to later on about how he was hounded so much by paparazzi and newspapers and TV news as well. And so we really just can't, comprehend it. And he's been through so much. And what we wanted to say is that, our thoughts very much go out to him, and we feel incredibly sorry for him. And we hope he's been able to lead a very fulfilled and normal, as much as one can do, life after this.
Yeah, I don't think you can be dealt a hand any worse in your start to life than that. So I'd very much agree with the sentiment.
And I have to say, he's done some interviews after this in his adult life, I should say. And he comes across as being very erudite, very brave, and speaks very well about this incident in a very calm way, in a way in which I don't think I would be as calm as he was. And quite frankly, I don't think I could speak to the press in the way that he does. So I just want to commend him for that, because I think he's incredibly brave.
Congratulations for having the bravery to do that. Because that's a man speaking about a sunny Wednesday morning set for family bonding, a nice walk in the park in a decent area of London, nowhere near as rough as other areas of London in that time, that had his day turned in to one of the worst that anyone could ever imagine. In what, with the context that we're about to bring you, involves probably one of the most sick, sadistic and scary serial killers that we have covered so far on this channel. The police are called, they arrive, they close the park, and the investigation begins immediately. There was approximately 500 people inside Wimbledon Common that day and around that time, all of which were questioned, had details taken down. And there was one man that even voluntarily gave the police his details because he had been in the park that day, although he didn't claim to have seen, heard or witnessed anything. But before we get into that man himself, Josh, why don't you pay a bit of tribute and tell me a bit more about one of the people that matters the most here in this case, and that is Rachel herself.
Yep. So Rachel Nickell was born in Colchester, Essex in 1968, and she went on to move to Tooting in southwest London, an area in which Joey and I obviously also know very well. Her early life was incredibly normal, and she lived a very sheltered and happy experience with her family. As a child, she was known as a sweet and kind young girl, and she had a passion for the arts, including acting, singing, and dancing. But despite all of these passions, she actually was guided down a more academic route, and she ended up studying English literature and history at university in London. And it was during this time that she was a student that she picked up a part-time job as a lifeguard, and this was in a swimming baths in Richmond, southwest London.
And Richmond was one of the other areas that you described as being one of the ones you'd feel the most safe in, wasn't it?
Exactly, 100%. This is the thing, like, I have to say, Richmond and Wimbledon, you go, those are the most desirable places to live in London, but because they're beautiful, leafy, but also because they're very safe. Like, whenever you're walking around those areas, you go, yeah, I feel absolutely fine.
They're the safest spot that you can get to London within 10, 15 minutes on the train or whatever, but you've probably not got that much chance of getting mugged in.
Exactly that. And it was in this swimming bath in Richmond that Rachel went on to meet a young man called Andre Hanscom. And basically this boy was a young tennis pro, like basically semi-pro tennis player at the time. And he was at the swimming baths because he was looking after his half brothers, and he was also there with a group of mates. Basically, they lock eyes. The young couple basically immediately start fancying each other, and Andre goes up to Rachel and starts having a conversation. It's said afterwards, immediately fell in love, and they agreed to go on a bit of a date. And on this date, they ended up talking for hours and hours, and there was obviously a real connection there. So much so that Rachel, after this date, ended up calling her mum and saying, this is the man that I want to spend the rest of my life with, which when you're only 19 years old is a huge statement. Now, we will say at this point that Andre was a little bit older. He was 25 years old. But again, completely normal conversation and relationship. And they really, really got on like a house on fire. So soon after that, they make their relationship official. But within a few months of their first date, Rachel found out that she was pregnant, which initially the couple were incredibly scared about. Rachel was still just 19 and she was still studying at university. And so Rachel stops her studies. She moves in with Andre and she basically decides that she's very happy to be a full-time mum. And the couple make that decision together. So what did Andre then do? Well, he decided that he needed to step up as a father and take a real full-time job. And that is where he started to become a motorcycle courier. And he started to bring in more cash and wanted to be the breadwinner for the family, basically. And very soon after, baby Alex was born and they built on their little family with a little rescue dog called Molly. And the couple were planning to actually get married, but they decided that they only wanted to do that when Alex was old enough to sort of comprehend the ceremony and actually be part of it. Rachel's dad, Andrew, said that she was a bright star in his life and that she radiated love, good humor, warmth, and generosity wherever she went. And Andre remembered Rachel for her sharpness of intelligence and also her quick-witted sense of fun. And on the day that she was attacked, Rachel was just 23. She was full of life and a very promising future ahead of her, all with the intense companionship she felt with young baby Alex. And this made the attack that Joey has described earlier on even more grotesque. And the British public were rightly appalled by the details that came out in that news coverage and the newspapers that were discussing the case. And so you can imagine how intense and how significant the search was to find her attacker.
Yes, I've already mentioned that everyone in the park had details taken down. If they were significant enough, they were called in for interview. And actually, over the next month or so, roughly 4,500 statements were taken, given to, and examined by the police. Roughly 3,000 people were interviewed over the coming months in relation to the murder of Rachel.
This shows you how many people were actually at the Common or around the Common at this time to say that 3,000 people were interviewed. This isn't something which, you know, people just happen in the dead of night. There was no one around. It just shows you how many potential witnesses there were for this crime.
Wimbledon Common is massive.
Yeah.
Yeah? And it's massive for a reason. Why are places normally built to be big, or why are places normally big? Because a lot of people like to go there. They flock on those sort of places as soon as the first bit of sun comes out in the UK. We all know this because we are no different. And Wimbledon Common that day was also no different. And what we've got to speak about as well, historically, I'm jumping forward a little bit here, but like the Roehampton estate wasn't always there. That had been built at a later date, and that meant the areas such as Wimbledon Common were in a period of time where London was quickly progressing. A lot of buildings were being built, a lot of residential communities were starting to appear, and Wimbledon Common was very much at the heart of a lot of this. And the reason I'm actually speaking about the timings of when the population around Wimbledon Common would have increased is because at one point, Wimbledon Common may or may not have had a reputation for some kind of behaviour or activities. But as I'm about to get onto, that was very, very much a thing of the past by 1992. If ever. And on the 12th of August, 1992, armed police arrest 12 men in connection with the murder. The public feel that we're going to get the breakthrough that we needed, and the actual number of the amount of men that were arrested was a shock. And therefore, what was probably an even bigger shock was the fact that all men were released without charge because of a lack of evidence. comes. And on the 3rd of September, the BBC air an appeal on a very popular show that I'm guessing many of you love and many of you probably still sometimes miss, as I do, which is Crimewatch. And off the back of the Crimewatch appeal, much like many historic cases in the British true crime culture, the phone lines begin to flood. When the Wimbledon Common location becomes a centre point of this case, one man's name seems to keep popping up. A man that many people find hangs around those sort of places. A man that many people describe as peculiar, strange, and a man that some people allege was doing things that he shouldn't have been within Wimbledon Common. And that man's name was Colin Stagg. Now, remember I told you that a man voluntarily gave his name and his details to the police that day? Well, that was Colin Stagg, because Colin Stagg claimed that he had been in the park that day. He had been walking his dog earlier on, but had actually left the park to go home. He had left the park to go home to have a couple of paracetamol, apparently, because he had a headache. He then wakes back up from his headache, and that's when he heads towards the park. By this point, the park is secluded off, basically, by the police.
Can we just say as well, right, at this point, a lot of serial killers, or a lot of killers in general, will say that they're at a particular area at a particular time to use that as a sort of an alibi to go, yeah, I was there, but I was doing something else. Like, obviously, if you find any CCTV of me, or if anyone says I was there, I was just on a dog walk. I had nothing to do with it. I was actually at a different area of the park. So it gives you sort of like a carte blanche approach, or a start of an alibi to go, yeah, I was there, but I wasn't in the general area. I was okay.
You mentioned CCTV there. We're talking 1992. We're not talking the modern day. So yes, it had CCTV, and those CCTV mostly compiled of images rather than video footage, wasn't it? It would be bomb, shot,
very limited,
bomb, shot,
and very shot. Pixelated, very difficult to find actual people's faces and that sort of thing. It was difficult to isolate it, wasn't it?
And therefore, sometimes people that we've covered in these cases have believed that before the era of CCTV, it would be as simple as saying something like, well, hold on, I was at home, because I can tell you now, Richard and Judy was on the TV at that time. I was watching it. Like, TV magazines and catalogue listings didn't exist. But that was one thing that a lot of people used to do. And another thing that a lot of criminals do, Josh, is return.
Go on.
To the scene of the crime.
Yeah, they do. And this apparently is what he did, because basically he was there to start off with. He then says he goes home to take that paracetamol, and he returned to Wimbledon Common after that. Did he not?
He did. He did. And when the Crimewatch appeal runs, multiple women ring in. Multiple women speak about feeling uncomfortable about this man, Colin Stagg. They also say that he 1,000,000% spends a lot of time over Wimbledon Common, and they even say that Colin Stagg is a very good match for an e-fit that the police were able to produce. Now, criminologists working on the case had drawn up a persona almost of a suspect that they believed could be the man that had carried out the attack, and that was one of a sexually frustrated loner who lived locally. And Colin Stagg did live locally. He was known as a loner, and he was someone that was single, so you could maybe imply could have been sexually frustrated. I mean, Josh, I don't know. Do you know anything about his love life to this point?
I don't know anything about his love life.
No. How old was he?
He was 29 years old. Are you going to tell me something that I should know about what he was up to when he was 29?
I don't know. Do you know?
I think you do know something. I think you should say it.
I don't think he was up to a lot at 29 years old.
You're saying he might have been a V-word.
Colin Stagg was still emerging.
Yes, he was. He was. But what we should say on criminal personas at this time is very much what someone believes a potential suspect would be. They're putting together what could be some potential sort of various different things about a person without going into detail going, I can prove that they're like this. I can prove that they're like this. It's just someone's perspective based on a psychological profile to go, other people in the past have committed similar crimes and they've had these traits. And what we know in humanity is each individual is very, very different. So it's difficult to say.
I mean, what we know about the officer or criminologist that actually painted this persona, this criminal profile, is yes, he's had some hits. He's had many misses, this man, if you've ever looked into him. He's painted many criminal personas that haven't been correct. But as much doubt as I may show over how much I believe the criminologist, the police force definitely did believe that persona. And they believed that persona was a perfect fit for Colin Stagg. By this point, another 500 people have been interviewed, and someone that was working for the Metropolitan Police at the time allegedly stated that the police force was solely obsessed with Colin Stagg. And it turns out around the week that Rachel was actually murdered, Colin Stagg himself found himself in trouble with the law. And this was after a woman accused him of indecent exposure inside of the park. And here's where I'm going to explain to you what happened. But in doing so, I need to ask you a question, Josh. You said you've been to Wimbledon Common, 20 odd times?
20 plus times.
20 plus times. Ever seen anyone naked there?
I've never seen anyone naked there.
Never?
I've never seen any colonies, any nudist areas. No one naked in Wimbledon Common.
But is it not a well-known nudist area, Wimbledon Common?
If you're in the 1940s, potentially.
Potentially. Not even proven, but potentially in the 1940s.
Because we've read somewhere that basically that was a potential thing that went on in Wimbledon Common in the 1940s.
Who's here to prove it?
A very long time ago.
There we go. What we do know is that by 1992, nude sunbathing was not something that was allowed in even secluded areas of Wimbledon Common. Josh, would you ever sunbathe nude even in your own garden just at the fear that a neighbour could see you?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
And you wouldn't either, Joey.
No, I wouldn't either. Do you know what I mean?
No.
And the fact that this incident did happen is enough for me to probably feel like the public were fair in their assertion that this man may be a wrong 'un. Now, he pled guilty to indecent exposure in court and was given a £200 fine. But Colin Stagg was obviously very, very comfortable with going on camera, documentaries after, and stating almost facts like that, you know, it was a nudist area, it was secluded. I'm not fucking having any of that. Colin Stagg was a man that was in his, late 20s, early 30s or something like that.
Yeah, late 20s,
I'm telling you now, you don't behave like that. You never know who might come out of the bushes. You never know whether a kid getting his football or something like that might come out and you're sitting there bollock naked. No, I'm not having it. It's noncy behaviour. And to be fair, Colin Stagg spent some time in prison, which we're going to speak about, right? If I was in charge of the country, I would put people in prison for doing that. If it's against the law, you don't go out of your house naked. And this is the time that rumours really do start to circulate about Colin Stagg. There are a lot of rumours that he has dodgy dealings. He's described as a deranged oddball at times. And society-wise, he was frowned upon.
I think you're doing a disservice by saying they're just rumours, because the police actually went and searched his house and there was a lot more than just rumours that he was interested in things like the occult and Satanism. Because when they get to his house, they find iconography of Satanism, pentagrams, weird shit, basically all over his house. When interviewed about this, Joey, he goes, well, it used to belong to my brother and my brother did all of this. Convenient excuse. He then has, beyond the paintings and weird shit that's all around his house, books on the occult, on Satanism. But it's more than that. He also had robes that were similar in these Satanistic rituals, like basically weird stuff that you wouldn't just expect a normal person to have. And also, it said that the attacker wore similar clothes to what was found in Colin Stagg's house. So it isn't just, what I want to just say at this point is, it's not just rumours, Joey. They found stuff by the police in his apartment.
And they are huge coincidences. I would say they're coincidences in line with what they found in Ruth Neve's house after the horrific murder of her young son, Ricky Neve. She was suspected. She may well have been sent to prison for that. If I remember, she was definitely arrested.
She was definitely questioned based on that, based on the circumstantial evidence.
And it definitely wasn't her in the end.
No, it wasn't her.
And do you think there was a thing at this time? Because I truly believe, like in the modern day, they wouldn't even bring any sort of religious
not based on the
like
cult
that
stuff
into it.
No.
But it was a different time back then, and it was very much something that people bought into at the time.
It was, and I remember this coming from America, actually, this sort of like cult scare, this satanistic like fear that the people had.
They linked a lot of that with Columbine, by the way. They called them the trench coat mafia.
Cult. Yeah, and there's loads of other cases that we've covered on the channel, even where we've talked about similar occult weird stuff going on. But you're right, in the modern day, that would just be seen as sort of like, I don't know, stuff around the house that were books that we wouldn't even think about.
Yeah.
But in this point, this was used as very key circumstantial evidence against Colin Stagg, and the public very much agreed that this was weird.
Potentially. Have you ever punched someone at Chelsea?
No. You have.
You haven't, have you?
I've not.
You've not. Would I find maybe the Football Factory on your watch history?
I have watched Football Factory and Green Street.
Yeah, and you may have even read the book.
Might have even watched St George's Day.
There you go. There you go.
Rubbish film, by the way.
But does that mean you're a football hooligan?
No.
So having an interest in something doesn't necessarily mean that you would like to do that sort of thing.
We've said this a million times, Joe, about true crime cases. Imagine if people saw all the scripts that we've done on true crime cases.
There you go.
We'd be in big trouble.
There you go. But the public and the police very much had their mind set. No forensics, no DNA, no witnesses, no reports, and no confession. So, Josh, let me ask you, is what we have heard in terms of what they found in his flat and things like that enough to convict or even arrest a man on?
Well, I think you've been very disingenuous with the way that you've led this up, Joe, because you just said no witnesses, when we know that several witnesses came forward and thought that the man might have been Colin Stagg. So that's the first point.
There were no witnesses to the crime. Witnesses came forward and said that they thought the man was Colin Stagg. However, before any of those witnesses ever came forward, who else came forward and gave himself as a witness?
Colin Stagg. But as we've said, Joey, and we've covered this in, let's say, for example, the Huntley case, he was very open to talking both to the police and also the media. So that isn't something that you go, oh, he volunteered himself forward. He said that he was at the crime scene. That doesn't mean he's immediately off scot-free. In fact, that might be a reason to say he is at the crime scene and therefore we need to suspect him. But let's just carry on, because I've got some other evidence that we must paint the picture, because what I think is very interesting about these cases is you've got to remember it at the time. You've got to remember it about the evidence that they had on hand and what the police actually felt when they were conducting their investigation. Because what we will say more than anything is that the police very much thought that they found their man when they first were interrogating Colin Stagg. Because obviously you had the paintings on the wall, the occult books, the weird shit in his house, but there was way more than that as well. There was obviously the photo fit in which basically people that were at the scene saw this man and they felt that he was around the crime scene at the relevant time. And again, if you're looking for anything to put someone at the crime scene to say that they might have been involved, that's the first line of inquiry that you go on. And this is what people said. They said that they saw him there at the time. So that's another point, right? Again, the fact that he actually volunteered and said that he was there, as I say, also means that he could have been involved. There was also the police questioning. So he goes in, he speaks to the police. He's obviously very compliant because he goes in and actually speaks to them. But when he's under interrogation for the police, they ask him some very specific questions about what he was doing at a particular time. You know, where was he at this moment, being involved in the crime? But, you know, this is key thing to say exactly where you are at exactly what time. And basically he was going out that he said, I don't really know. It was between 9 and 10, you know, that sort of thing. And again, you can go, okay, well, there's no phones, are there? So like, you're not looking at the time every which way. He wore a watch. So, you know, he had appointments that day. So he must have known roughly what the time was. So again, I'm not just talking about the time frame, but he was evasive.
Just as many people knew the time in 1992 as in 2026.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact, and the fact of the matter is he was deemed by the police. And look, we're not there. We didn't see the interrogation happen, but the police said he was invasive. He was evasive when he was being interrogated. So again, that sort of leads someone to go, this is a bit wrong as well. And what I will say is the indecent exposure charge. A lot of people have argued that this has got nothing to do with what he would go on, you know, what he would potentially go on to later do. But again, this is often a precursor to far more serious crimes. We've seen this in various other cases where people go out and they'll do it, indecent exposure acts,
indecent
and then it will lead
exposure,
to something else.
Animals,
yes,
they start off with attacks before it moves on to murders. It's a footpath that we've seen trodden many, many times over on this channel, haven't we?
And this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to build the case. So what they were trying to do is they go, well, all of this circumstantial thing kind of adds up. So what we now need to do is we need to find forensic evidence or get a confession out of him, right? And what was clear in that 1992, the DNA profiling was nowhere near as advanced as it is right now. So right now we can get a shred of DNA and being able to extract that and being able to rule someone out or identify them very quickly. Whereas back then it was a lot more difficult to do that sort of work.
Would you say to the point where they could potentially already have the killer's DNA, but not have looked into it? I don't know.
Well, this is the thing, like based on how I say violent the crime was, there would be lots of DNA evidence there on the crime scene. Nowadays, it would be easily identifiable, but back then, I don't think it was as easy identifiable. So this is what I'm trying to say. The police were getting to this point where they were building circumstantial evidence and they were waiting for the DNA. But what was clear is they didn't have enough to go on just now.
And that is where we meet a lovely little woman named Lizzie James.
Right, before we get into that, we do want to talk a little bit about hair because blokes often don't want to talk about this, and it's a huge stereotype that we want to break because, Joey, we have started a bit of a journey, and that is with this video sponsor, Voy.
I'm excited about this journey because I am a man of routine, you know that. And the whole time you've known me, I've never changed my haircut, Josh. And that's the same as every single one of my friends for the last 20 odd years. Short back and sides is pretty much what I have. But as I'm getting older, I am starting to notice a couple of little patchy bits. A few of the viewers have actually pointed it out to me, and therefore you made sure you secured us someone that could potentially help with this.
And this is the thing, like what we want to do is we want to go on a journey and actually show you guys the real results of this. Like basically what we're going to do is sort of show month 1, which we're starting off now. So we've actually started the treatment ourselves. We're going through, we're taking the vitamins, we're using the shampoos. And then what we're going to do is show it month to month. And actually you can see in reality how it's helped us basically. So we're going to be doing it ourselves, and the proof's in the pudding. If it works on us, then it could potentially help you as well.
And it'd be interesting because we're both looking to get different things out of this. Correct? Yeah. I'm looking for a bit of density in the top. What about yourself?
I want to grow some hair back, sort of around the temples. I've never had a problem with any crown issues, but around the temples, I've noticed it's going further and further back. So hopefully this can actually help us.
We're soon going to find out, aren't we?
And the key thing to remember is that 1 in 6 men in the UK experience this. So it's very, very common indeed. And that is why Voy wants us to go through this journey. Now, what I would say is you might remember Voy by another name because they were called Manual back in the day. I would always refer to them as Manual, but they are now called Voy, but they still got all of the amazing treatments and support for men just like us. So if you, or potentially even your partner, because I know lots of you lovely ladies are watching these videos and you see that they want some potential help, just say, try out Voy and click the link in the description below for some support. I did it, and basically what you do is you go on the website, you enter a questionnaire. It basically says how long you've been experiencing hair loss, how long you've been having any symptoms, if you have any allergies, or if you've been told that you can't take any medications or you can't have any treatments. You go through all of this. It happens very quickly. I did it in less than 2 minutes. And then they'll give you a personalized treatment plan just for you. And everything's online and delivered directly to your door. They even have an app that you can track your progress through, which honestly makes the whole thing way easier. And what stood out for us is that when we went on the website and actually looked through the testimonials, we actually found that there were noticeable results for a lot of men, because I've seen so many companies come out and say that they have results, but when it comes down to it, they aren't there.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to practice the P word here, patience, because I know that hair growth isn't an overnight thing, which is why I'm glad that we've committed to 6 months of making sure that we are consistently going through the routines to see the results we get.
Exactly that. And look, if you want to pick this up for yourself, or as I say, you want to treat your partner to something that's going to make them feel and look way better, then all you need to do is hit it, the link in the description now. If you do so and use our code Joey and Josh, you'll get 45% off your first treatment.
And if you start as early as possible, you may well be able to stop that hair loss and save the trip to Turkey for that transplant.
Thank you to all of you for supporting Voy. It directly helps the channel, and we hope it helps you get your hair confidence back. Now let's get back into the video.
You can probably tell I'm not being serious. Lizzie James did not exist, or at least she didn't officially exist as an actual person, because Lizzie James was an undercover police officer that was used in one of the most controversial stings in police history. Basically, they look into Colin Stagg and they work out that this is the point I was alluding to in the beginning, Josh. I might say it. Sorry if it's crude or whatever. He's a virgin. He's never had anything in his life. At what, 29
years old, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? How do you get to 29 without ever,
Basically, a man with no social skills, very, very lonely. And I mean, you have to say it is strange, isn't it?
And would you say that having social skills probably takes away a lot of that naivety in social situations that you might sort of have before you had got those social skills?
Yeah, I think so.
And I would say that because of that, Colin Stagg fell straight into the trap. What the police do is they set something up called Operation Edzell, aka Operation Honeytrap. So they've looked into the background of Colin Stagg and they work out that he had basically replied to an ad in the Lonely Hearts column in a newspaper. Josh, could you tell me what is the Lonely Hearts?
So basically, back in the day, we didn't have dating apps. So what you would do is you would write a profile about yourself. You would explain a little bit more about what you were like and what you were interested in.
Did he use the criminologist profile or did he write his own one?
I feel like I don't think he actually wrote a Lonely Hearts, by the way.
Oh, really?
Don't think he did.
Oh.
I think he was replying to Lonely Hearts ads in the newspaper. I don't think he was, I don't think he had the wherewithal about him to be able to write a Lonely Hearts ad. So, but what he would do is reply to a lot of Lonely Hearts ads. And he'd be
a liker if he was on Facebook today. Probably.
Exactly. He would be a lurker on every dating app. That's very, that's very, very clear. So what happened is that he saw a Lonely Hearts ad by a young lady called Julie, and they started to have letter exchanges. So this is what would happen. Basically, you'd put an ad out there, you'd reply to it, you'd send a letter, in that letter you would say, I liked your ad, we're similar for these reasons, I'm this person, this is what I'm like, and you'd go from there. Like basically,
Julie, by the way, not a police officer, normal person.
Completely normal person, and she was very much looking for love. And unfortunately, she came across a man who had some very, very strange desires. So much so that Colin Stagg ended up writing a very explicit and, let's be honest, grotesque letter to Julie. So awful was it about him describing his sexual preferences and what he liked to do and how he liked to abuse women that she immediately cut off all contact from Colin Stagg as soon as she received that letter. And Julie didn't really think about that letter from that point on. She basically wanted to completely avoid Colin and she didn't really want anything to do with him. But one day in September of 1992, Julie turned on the TV and she turned on that infamous program, Crimewatch. She saw an e-fit of a man that she felt she very much recognized, and she was incredibly concerned about what this man could have done. She immediately calls up the Crimewatch phone lines and say, I know who this man is, and this man's name is Colin Stagg. She then has a conversation with the cops and she describes the letter that she had received. She then sends that letter to the police, and the police very much use that letter against Colin, because this is where the honey trap started. Basically, the police created this fictional character, which was called Lizzie. Lizzie replied to the original letter that Colin had sent Julie, saying that Julie was her friend. Although Julie wasn't interested in him, she very much was. And she was also very much interested in the type of sexual fantasies that Colin was interested in.
And at the start, Lizzie is probably operated by by a group of police officers when she's communicating with Colin and whatnot. But at this point, they actually get to the point in which they meet. And this is when the police officer that has obviously always gone unnamed poses as Lizzie James. They meet out in public. They meet in a park. And what they don't realise, or at least what Colin doesn't realise, is the dog walkers and the families that are having picnics in the park that day are mostly undercover old Bill. Because they think that they have sent this woman in there to be in arm's length of what they believe is a horrific and brutal murderer.
Can you imagine how terrified you would have been as this undercover police officer, as a young woman going to meet what she believes to be a very violent and sadistic killer? I honestly do sympathise for her, because I wouldn't want to be anywhere near this guy if he did what he said.
Can I tell you what I think, though?
Go on.
I don't know how terrified she would have been, because I think there could have been an element of doubt in this woman's head by this point.
Really?
Have you never seen the communications between the two?
I have.
Because this is something that was used against Colin Stagg in a big way. And obviously this was when they were in a sort of pen pal phase of their relationship. She was basically describing to him that she likes to feel vulnerable in these sexual scenarios. She likes to feel dominated. She even says something along the lines, I may be paraphrasing, but she basically says that she wouldn't want to sleep with a man that she didn't feel could do harm to her, and fear. In my opinion, she's very much trying to lead Colin down a line of talking of violent fantasies and things like that. And we obviously know that there's a case to build here. However, the reason I say that Lizzie may have not been as fearful as you described there, and I also understand there's every possibility that you're the one that's correct here, but the reason I say it is because there was never an admission of guilt. There was even questions, and even what was clearly judged to be entrapment, when she had basically said that she would only sleep with Colin if he admitted to being Rachel's murderer. This was after the point that Colin told her that he had been brought in for questioning over the case. She had showed a lot of interest in it. They had started discussing it. And amongst those deep discussions was never a confession. A confession which even Colin admits he believed at the time would have got him a bit of crumpet. And
this is the thing, you've got to put yourself in Colin's headspace right now. He's a 29-year-old virgin. He's got someone that is super into him. I've seen weaker men go out there and confess anything that they wanted to for that woman at that time. You can completely understand why he would have gone, yeah, I did it, because it would have meant that he finally, got the relationship that he was desperately looking for. But the thing is that Colin didn't do that, Jay. He actually said, I didn't do this. And as much as you want me to say that I did, I wasn't actually guilty of this crime.
And can now I say something that will offend... Well, I say people, it'll offend Colin. I don't perceive from, again, listen, I'm not an academically smart man, yeah? But I've got enough sense about me. I don't believe that Colin Stagg has the most common sense in the world from the multiple interviews I've watched of him and from studying him on this case. And therefore, Josh, do you know what I don't believe?
Go on.
I don't believe he was holding back because he felt like it could have been some sting or some undercover.
No, he didn't. Officer. He didn't think that. He didn't know that they were police officers.
I think he truly believed that Lizzie was a genuine love interest.
Yeah.
And he actually said in an interview where he was speaking about Lizzie that he felt like some of her fantasies and some of the things that she was speaking about were a bit on top. He described her as a bit of a psycho, but he admitted that he wasn't thinking with his head. His mind was somewhere else. So at this point, despite the fact that there is the honey trap going on, it doesn't really feel like it's getting anywhere. And you're probably thinking that this is a dead end. No, because on the 13th of August, 1997, the police finally arrest Colin Stagg. They believe that the fact that there were witnesses to him being in the park, obviously one of those witnesses being himself who gave the police officer his information, the fact that he was single and lonely, and the fact that while under the impression that he was in a romantic relationship, he spoke with Lizzie about violent sexual fantasies that, in my opinion, were encouraged initially by Lizzie. This was all enough to prove that this man was guilty of murder. And for the next 12 or so months, Colin Stagg is sat behind bars for the horrific murder of mother Rachel Nickell. He spent time in both HMP Wandsworth and Brixton, and actually, surprisingly enough, was lucky enough to not get attacked in prison. But he wasn't in prison for all that long, Josh, because in September 1994, his case finally goes to trial, and when it does, there's a real lack of evidence, isn't there?
I think lack of evidence is the most understatement you've ever done in your entire life, because the judge reviewed this honey trap evidence. They looked through all of the documents, all of the transcript, all of the letters, all of the footage that they had, and they deemed this act to be completely unadmissible in court. He said that the whole thing was a disgrace, and he basically didn't even bother adding it into evidence. So without that honey trap, and let's be honest, even with the honey trap, there wasn't enough to go on. They didn't have the DNA. They didn't have that smoking gun. They didn't have the murder weapon. They didn't have any witnesses. They didn't have a confession. So what was clear is that the court case was completely null and void.
Stagg is acquitted and freed immediately from prison. But that doesn't mean that in the eyes of the public that he is still not guilty. Because what you've got to remember here is, yeah, it's been dropped for a lack of evidence, but when's the only real time when everyone stops suspecting you, Josh?
When you're allowed and deemed to be innocent in court.
That would more than often be when the real killer has actually been brought to justice.
Very true.
Something that didn't happen for a long, long time. And again, to bring in my own sort of experience here, Colin Stagg, despite the fact that he owned a flat on the council estate in Roehampton, literally just behind us here, a flat that he refused to move out of, a flat that he basically turned into a bunker because of the security measures and stuff like that, which fair enough, you can understand. Amongst that, I believe that Colin Stagg may or may well have also lived at another property. He may have also lived around the Worcester Park and Stoneleigh area. And I may or may not know quite a lot of people that came into contact with Colin Stagg.
So tell me, what is this connection then?
Colin Stagg came into contact with a family member of mine. Nothing negative happened. This family member of mine was working somewhere on a till. And I said the other day, so what did everyone feel about this and whatever? Because he was like known to be around the area and stuff like that. And she said, well, everyone thought he'd done it. People used to spit at him in the street and stuff like that. And I said, really? I said, you didn't do that, did you? She said, nah. But she said, I just used to close my till whenever he came into the shop. I said, what, she wouldn't serve him? And this family member of mine said, nah, I wouldn't serve him. Which, to be fair, knowing this family member of mine, just for the fact that he was going nude in Wimbledon Common, she wouldn't have served him anyway. Yeah, so fair play to her. But what I'm saying is, he was vilified in society, and probably, even though I've been very strong on my opinion with this as a father of a daughter, who, let's be honest, if I caught a man in the nude in the park, he's getting hands laid on him. But what I'm saying is, I can understand that. I can understand that there would be a lot of feeling of, we've got a wrong one in society, but it definitely doesn't deem being spat on in the street once you've served time for something that you didn't actually.
And this is the thing, like he was acquitted in court. So again, often people go, there's a lack of evidence, he could still be guilty. But the fact of the matter was, he went through this entire Honeytrap experiment, awful thing that they did to him. There wasn't any real evidence against him beyond what we've described as very circumstantial. So when you paint that picture, he should have been allowed to live his life. And the fact of the matter was, for a very long time, we've mentioned decades, it's even more than a decade, he lived his life still being number one suspect and still being, accused of this crime. And people really did believe it.
And that went on all the way until 2008, when a jaw-dropping breakthrough blew this case wide open.
And I'm glad you mentioned 2008, because it is 16 years now after the original attack in 1992. Alex, the poor boy that had to see his mum attacked and murdered, is now a fully grown man and still desperate to find justice for his mother. But before I go on to what happened after 2008, why don't we go back to a time before Rachel was attacked in 1989? And that's because here, a lady called Pauline Napper calls the police. She said her son, Robert Napper, had confessed something truly disgusting to her. She said that he came home one day and in great detail described that he had raped a woman in Plumstead Common. And so obviously appalled about this, Pauline calls up the old Bill straight away and tells him exactly what Robert had told her. But tragically, the police never even took a statement from Pauline. And they didn't interview Robert Napper either. And the reason why they did that is because they had no suspected attacks in the Common at that time. There was nothing apparently on police records, but the fact of the matter is that that was totally untrue and the police lied to the public there. But obviously I've mentioned Robert Napper, but why don't I tell you a little bit more about who he was? Robert Napper was born on the 25th of February 1966 in southeast London. His early life was dysfunctional and he witnessed his father frequently and brutally abusing his mother. The couple went on to divorce when Robert was just 10 years old, and Robert, along with his 3 younger siblings, were placed into foster care. The trauma of his home life resulted in him receiving psychiatric treatment at the Maudsley Hospital in Camberwell for over 6 years. But it got a lot worse for Robert. And by the age of just 13, when he was on holiday with his family, a very close family member, a male family member, actually sexually assaulted him as well. And from this point on, Robert was never the same. People that were around him described him as a robot from this point on. And they also said that he very much started to become a recluse. He was also a bully, and he took on his father's behavior of violence, even against his siblings. And it was said that he also spied on his sister while she was undressing. He was later diagnosed with severe mental health problems, including paranoid schizophrenia and also Asperger's syndrome. And as he grew up into a man, what started to happen was that this tendency of violence, and this violence became more and more severe. And eventually he would start going out there into the wide world and attacking the public, because there were a series of attacks across South London, which at the time were unsolved, and no one knew it was Robert that was committing them, but rather a shadowy figure only called the Green Chain Rapist. And in August of 1989, Napper broke into a person's home, a mother who was just 31 years old. And this was the Plumstead Common attack that he told his mother about. And what we haven't said so far is that he was wearing a mask and he was armed with a Stanley knife, and he brutally raped her in front of her children. And then on March the 10th, 1992, a second attack happened, this time in Hither Green. Robert Napper attempted to rape a 17-year-old girl at knife point along the Green Chain Walk. And then on March 18th, 1992, a third attack happened, again on Hither Green. Just 8 days later, Robert Napper attacked another 17-year-old girl along the same path, attempting to rape her at knife point. And on May the 24th, 1992, the fourth attack happened in Eltham. Less than 2 months before Rachel Nickell's murder, Napper attacked a 22-year-old blonde mother walking her toddler in a buggy. He grabbed her from behind, put a ligature around her neck, and then violently beat and assaulted her in front of her child. So with all of that in mind, what's very clear is that Robert is a very dangerous man indeed, and he had a record of attacks that were very similar to that of Rachel Nickell, which makes the events of the 15th of July 1992 even more horrific, because let's be honest, Joey, it absolutely could have been stopped, and Robert Napper should have absolutely been behind bars before this point. And remember, in the immediate aftermath of the attack, we had said that several people had called in after watching Crimewatch and identified Colin Stagg as being the potential suspect. Well, the fact of the matter is that a lot of other people also called in and said that Robert Napper was in fact the man the police should be looking at. And they said that he looked very much like that E-fit. So what you can imagine here is that the police were focusing on Colin Stagg, so they just discounted Robert Napper and they didn't even look into him. Well, that's not the case. They actually went and interviewed Robert Napper in his house. And they even tried to blood sample him, which he refused the police of doing so, which in itself is a little bit suspicious. And the police, even after doing this, ruled Robert Napper out of the investigation. And the reason why they did so, Joey, is absolutely crazy. Do you know why they did this?
No. Why did they rule him out?
They ruled him out because the attacker was said to be 5'7" tall, which is very different from the height of Robert Napper. Robert Napper is 6'2". He's a big guy. Right. Okay. But what they didn't identify, bearing in mind they went round to his house, they actually saw him, they spoke to him for several hours, the police, was that the guy walked with a huge stoop. The guy had a real hunchback. So when he was walking around, he could have been mistaken for being under 6 foot. So the fact of the matter is, they immediately ruled him out for a ridiculous reason.
Do you know what? That actually makes sense, because you know when you picture the photos, which I'm sure have been showed in overlay already, he's always like that, isn't he? He's always very much, he looks like a lizard or something.
Yeah. And this is the thing. This is what he actually had. He had that stoop and it was famous. It was well known that he had this. And in fact, so much so that I believe it's even in police documents that he had a stoop. So it's awful. So the question that you might be asking is, what happened next? Because as we said, it wasn't until 2008 that the next breakthrough happened in the case. But Robert Napper was very active between 1992 and 2008. So let me explain what he was doing. In May 1994, less than 2 years after the murder of Rachel, while Stagg was still on remand, Robert Napper was arrested for horrific November 1993 murders of 27-year-old Samantha Bissett and her 4-year-old daughter, Jasmine. Napper broke into Samantha's home and subjected her to a prolonged and frenzied attack, so awful that I can't quite describe it on YouTube. He then attacked 4-year-old Jasmine and strangled her, as well as trying to drown her in her own bath. When police attended the scene, it was described as so disgusting and so traumatic that some police had residual impact for several years after that. In fact, the official police photographer had to take 2 years of leave, of compassionate leave, and because of the trauma of what she saw at the scene. But police found lots of evidence at the scene, including Napper's fingerprints. So they went to his flat, got a search warrant, and decided to look around. And can you remember, Joey, what they found inside of his flat?
Yes, they found one of the old school maps that your granddad used to get out and nearly cause crashes during the car drives when they were looking for directions or whatever. They found one of them inside of his flat. And wasn't there specific locations highlighted and circled where attacks had taken place?
Exactly that. You know, I just went through all of the attacks and I said where they were. Every single one of those had a circle around it where the attack exactly happened. So it wasn't like it was a big area. It was the place that the attack actually occurred.
Probably connects you more to a crime than, say, nude sunbathing in the same park?
Or some occult images that were found or books that were found in your property. I would say so. But what happens if I told you that it wasn't just those attacks that I detailed earlier on, but also that Wimbledon Common was highlighted in that A to Z map?
Well, then we start to build a clearer picture of the man who may well have been responsible.
So this case ended up going to trial in 1995, and armed with that evidence of the fingerprint that was found at the scene, as well as the A to Z and all of the circumstantial evidence therein, they deemed Robert Napper to be guilty of the crime of murdering Samantha and her daughter Jasmine. But, Joey, this is your biggest bugbear in true crime history. He was not found guilty of murder. Unfortunately, Robert Napper was only found guilty of manslaughter. Now, what is the reason why he would possibly be found guilty of manslaughter and not murder, Jerry?
The same reason that every single one of these fuckers are found guilty of manslaughter rather than murder, because they call it what, Josh? Diminished responsibility?
Diminished responsibility because he was deemed not mentally stable at the time of the attack.
And the first place my mind goes to is, who the fuck is mentally stable when they carry out that sort of attack? And even if you deem him to be insane, throw the fucking book at him. The cunt attacks people in front of their children. That's something that he actively likes to do. It's something that he clearly gets a buzz and a lust from. And despite what was said in court, I feel like this man should have been put in a prison. I will die on my sword with that. This man should have been put in a prison. Whether he had learning difficulties, whether he
had a hard childhood,
even whether he had a hard child. Many people have hard childhoods. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Many people have childhoods. And do you know why you don't know about it? Because most of those people, the majority, we look back through these cases and we go, God, this trigger point in this childhood, this trigger point in this childhood. I could give you 1,000 times more cases of normal people who stick a suit on and go to work, or get their trowel and they build bricks on a building site and whatever, and they also had that childhood trauma, Josh. But they didn't go on to fucking kill anyone.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely up to
You're
my
raging.
fucking wits end with these absolute idiots going, oh yeah, no, diminished responsibility. He done what he done. He planned it out. He had a map. He had everything there. There's no diminished responsibility. The fucking sick bastard done what he wanted to do.
Exactly. And what is, I suppose, the best part of the trial is that he was given an indefinite sentence in a secure facility. But as you say, that wasn't a prison, but instead it was the Broadmoor High Security Hospital instead. So, Joey, can you explain to me why you don't deem that to be as severe a punishment as someone going to prison for the rest of their lives? Because I don't quite know the difference.
What's your favourite Robert Napper prison attack? What's your favourite time that he's been scalded?
I don't think he has been attacked,
or stabbed,
has he been attacked?
Beaten, or had his throat slit in his cell like Ian Watkins and like Roy Whiting and Ian Huntley and fucking scummy pieces of shit like that. What's the reason why?
Because he's in a hospital.
Because he's in a hospital. High security. No chance of being let out of sight at any point, and therefore constant surveillance, constant protection, and protection that his victims did not have.
And while he was in this secure hospital facility in December 1995, he was questioned and interrogated about Rachel Nickell's death. The fact of the matter is, there was enough evidence for me to say that he was implicated in it, especially when you look at the A to Z. But unfortunately, there wasn't enough to convict him of the crime in 1995. So from that point on, he stays in Broadmoor and continues his sentence. But it wasn't until 2001 that we get the next break in the case. Yes, over 6 years later, Scotland Yard set up a cold case review team called Operation Orchid to re-examine the Rachel Nickell murder and bring in some world-leading forensic experts, including Dr. Angela Gallup. She started looking into the case, but it wasn't until 2004 when she used newly refined DNA techniques and forensic scientists obtained a potential DNA match pointing from the crime scene of Rachel towards Robert Napa. By July 2006, police interviewed Napa for 2 more days at Broadmoor Hospital. And by November 2007, they were happy enough to officially charge Robert Napa because they had gained enough evidence linking him with the murder of Rachel Nickell. So, Joey, you will presumably want to know what that evidence actually was. So shall I run through it for you?
Yep, let's go.
Okay, so there was the DNA evidence that I've obviously said. So at the crime scene, they identified some DNA evidence at the time. It was deemed not enough in 1992, but with these advanced techniques I've just described, they were able to identify that. And it's, 1 in tens of millions sort of mistake that it could be that it wasn't Robert Napa, but they were enough to say, yes, that was his DNA. It was linked at the scene. And therefore, finally, we got some conclusive evidence of who the potential murderer could have been.
You know about the confession, no?
By Robert Napa.
By Robert Napa.
I didn't know about this, no.
So Robert Napa, in the late 90s, confessed to his cellmate to killing Rachel. The cellmate waits until he's not sharing a cell or until he's not inside the facility. And in 2002, he goes to the police and he reports the confession that his former cellmate allegedly gave him. And that is the hat trick. That's 3 witnesses that have now come forward to the police. You've got the cellmate. You've got a mother who obviously isn't a witness, but did describe the pretty weird ongoings with her son, Robert Napa. And there was also another report to the police by a man who overheard a man bragging about killing Rachel in a pub. That man was identified to be Robert Napa.
But it wasn't just all of these confessions. The police also had other evidence as well to convict this man. They used some paint flecks that were found in the hair of poor baby Alex. Basically, there were some red paint specks that were found after the attack. The police identified these, kept them in evidence, and then they later on went to analyze them. They found that those paint flecks were very similar to the color and type of paint that were found on a toolbox that Robert Napa used. Inside that toolbox were various different weapons as well as the A to Z, and it was deemed that this toolbox might have been his cache of murder paraphernalia. So those paint flecks were from the toolbox that Robert Napa had, and they were able to prove that chemically. So again, it's a bit of an open shut case at this point. The forensic evidence was there, but they had more. There was a footprint mark from the scene, and that was identified to be very close to a set of dress shoes that Robert Napa possessed. So in December 2008, Robert Napa pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of Rachel Nickell on the grounds of diminished responsibility, again due to his paranoid schizophrenia and Asperger's syndrome. The judge ordered him to be held indefinitely still at Broadmoor. And the judge added in their closing remarks that Robert Napa was very unlikely to be ever released from a secure confinement in the hospital facility. So what's clear is that he very much won't get out, which I suppose is the one upside to this horrific case.
Yeah, I mean, what's not an upside to it is the fact that he has 24-hour surveillance. I'm not talking about, someone goes to watch him when he has a shit. I'm talking he has multiple guards watching him while he sleeps even. And it is pretty mind-blowing, isn't it, that this fella spent decades inside of, even if it is a hospital, in essence, a correctional facility, a facility that has held violent offenders that we know of, extremely violent offenders that pretty much made it a hobby, a pastime of theirs to attack these sort of inmates, yet Robert Napa has never been got to. And do you know where my mind goes straight away then?
Yeah, go on.
Straight to the tax money I pay, to be completely honest with you, Josh. Pay tax money to keep this child killer and woman abuser and targeter and murderer even safe. It blows my mind. One thing that will have blown one man's mind will be the treatment that Colin Stagg will have been subjected to over that period of time. And it doesn't take a genius, Josh, does it, to work out that there's probably going to be a compensation claim required here.
Yeah, there is. And the fact of the matter was, Colin Stagg, I should say, received a significant amount of money for the trauma, the abuse, the time he actually spent in prison as well, because obviously you're innocent until proven guilty, but when on remand, you're sat in a prison waiting for your trial. So the fact of the matter is he had 12 months of his life taken away from him.
Dangerous prisons.
Yeah, exactly. So he had 12 months.
He was lucky, by the way. He was lucky to be safe. He was very lucky because he had way more chance of getting done than Robert Napper in the prison that he was in. And to be honest with you, inside of the psychiatric units, they're carers, not screws. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And I think that you don't need me to go into the difference of someone that is there to care for a patient and a screw inside a rough prison. It's night and day.
So how much did he actually end up getting then in terms of compensation?
Probably just shy of around £1 million. He received £700,000 from the Home Office, who accepted that not only did he lose those years in prison, he also lost lifelong privacy and was subjected to bullying, harassment, and constant rejection from moving on with his life. Did you ever go to the job centre, Josh?
I've never been in a job centre, no.
You've never been in a job centre?
Have you?
Yeah, of course I have.
I've never been in one.
I've never been in one looking for a job, I'll tell you that. But one thing is, the job centre said they literally defined Colin Stagg as unemployable because they said as soon as they sent through a CV to any employer, they would knock it back straight away.
So let's be honest, £800,000 or 700 plus isn't really enough. Then if you're talking about that, if he can't get employed for the rest of his life.
Well, he'd been on job seekers. That's what I said about the job centre.
There you go.
He'd been on job seekers allowance. He'd have had that payday, still owning the flat in Roehampton, although it was alleged that he was living elsewhere. And not only that, it then came out that the police knew and withheld the information, which I do understand there's legitimate reasons for this when you're ongoing an investigation. But the police knew that it was Robert Napper 2 years before the public. And that meant that Colin Stagg had to have an extra, 24 months of being persecuted by the public.
Spat on, abused by the public. Absolutely. But can I tell you another fact about compensation before we move on from this point? Because did you know that the police officer tried to sue the police service for her crimes in terms of being part of the Honeytrap scheme?
Is this Lizzie James?
Lizzie James.
Right.
So she tried to sue the basically the British taxpayer, effectively, right? And she ended up winning that claim, and she got over £100,000 of compensation because it was said that she then couldn't go on to work in the police force and she couldn't get a job after that. But that was a lot of money that she received.
Well, not just that though. They have... I can't say they've told her because then I'm alleging something, but read between the lines. They've said to her, look, this guy's allegedly, they've said to her, this is the guy. We've got him. We just need you to get him. Yeah. And once we get him, he's never getting out. Yeah. So even though I don't class it as a wrong, in her mind, originally, she was wronging someone that there's never going to be no consequence of. He's going to go to prison. You're going to get him in jail. You're doing a good thing here. It turned out it was the wrong person. And then that officer, Lizzie James, which, by the way, she's accountable for. She signed up to do it. But that officer, Lizzie James, would have to live looking over her shoulder for the rest of her life. Because whether or not he was guilty of the murder of Rachel, which he clearly wasn't, Colin Stagg, like anyone else, it doesn't matter whether they've got a criminal record or not, would then have reasonable cause, in my opinion, to have a vendetta against that person.
I absolutely would, but I don't know how violent or sadistic Colin actually is towards her. Does that make sense?
It does make definite sense, but the fact that you have made enemies under probably false pretenses, I'm not sure.
But it doesn't just end there with the compensation, Joey, because did you know that Alex, Rachel's son, also got some compensation by the British government for all of the trauma, pain, all of the paparazzi. We haven't even really described this. Basically, Alex was followed around by paparazzi, by newspapers, by journalists for several years. So much so that he actually ended up moving to France with his father, Andre. So they actually had to leave the country to try and get away with it, right?
They left multiple countries.
Exactly. France, so sad.
Spain.
So sad.
When they were getting to certain places after a couple of weeks of normality or whatever, the press would descend upon a little village.
This is a child Like, we're talking literally about a child being harassed. I honestly feel so sorry for him. But what I feel even more sorry for is when you put all of the conversation in context, because Alex, for all of the therapy, all of the support that he needed, only got £20,000.
So he
got less than the copper that sued the police force. It's just sick. And this is the thing, again, this is why our thoughts go out to Alex, and maybe I'll be able to find some fundraising for him, or I'll try and link anything I can really in the description. But it is a disgrace the way he was treated. I feel so sorry for him.
Alex is a much bigger man than myself, because one of the quotes I believe to have read when researching this case was that he's learnt to forgive the killer of his mother, which is something that I could never do.
I could never do it.
You know what I mean? I would be pretending to go loco just to get myself inside Broadmoor so I could finish him off myself. The fact that this fella has been through something that I don't even want to imagine, something that as a parent, literally, I'm not going to do it now, but it brings a tear to my eye. It's the most awful, horrific, violent, and personally touching in a horrible way case that probably we've covered.
And also, your thoughts have to go out to Andre as well. The love of his life taken away. And again, he then becomes a single parent, has to raise Alex by himself, raise Alex when he's been through so much as well. So to both of them, our thoughts go out to you.
There'd be so many dads that when they babysit, whatever I say babysit, they're their own kids. I'm just talking about myself. But like, I sit there and I think, last night I was babysitting, I was looking after the kids, and I sit and think, God, like, mate, that's an awful thing to think, but I think, God, imagine it was just me, like, imagine if that happened and whatever. And it is the most horrible and daunting thought and whatever, having to raise a child and explain to that child what had happened. My heart goes out to him. Yeah, hopefully we can provide some links in the description that can at least raise awareness, if not support Alex.
Well, thank you so much for getting to the end of another episode. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Joey and Josh. And also, if you can, like the video. And if you have the ability to, please do hype it. It means the world to us when you do. And if you want these episodes up to 48 hours before anyone else and direct access to us to encourage particular cases, then just become a member of the Hardcore. There is a link in the description below to join, and it is less than the price of a cup of coffee every single month to get all of the privileges that I just said.
And can I suggest one case for these guys to watch here? It's one that we have had requested to us recently, and to be honest, since the channel started, from our members, and that is the Yorkshire Ripper. And there are a couple of London-based cases that I could have suggested, but something sparked it in my mind here. You said to me earlier off camera, Josh, that if Robert Napper had have never been caught, you feel like we could have been looking at one of the most notorious serial killers from our life.
Yeah, another Ripper, potentially. And before we go, I just want to say a huge thanks to Voy for sponsoring this video. Remember, you can get 45% off your first treatment if you use code Joey and Josh and use the link in the description below. Huge thanks to them. Huge thanks to all of you that have supported Voy.
I would very much advise you to go and watch the video on screen right now. Thank you so much to all of you that have made it to the end of another video. We absolutely love you guys. We will see you all in the next one.